You can't just put it all in the fridge. You shouldn't store potatoes in the fridge, and you shouldn't store onions in the fridge. Don't put your apples on the counter because they'll just get mealy really fast. Storing your produce takes a little more thought and intention than people think. There are three main factors you have to consider when you're storing fresh fruits and vegetables: temperature, ethylene gas, and airflow. Some produce, like apples and pears and bananas, give off ethylene gas as they ripen. And ethylene gas can cause other fruits and vegetables to ripen faster. But that depends on whether those other fruits and vegetables are sensitive to ethylene gas. So bottom line is, know what produces ethylene, know what's sensitive to ethylene, and keep them separate. Another factor that's important is airflow. This is most important with room temperature storage, less important when you're storing things in the refrigerator. When we talk about temperature, broad strokes, that means in the refrigerator or out of the refrigerator. Not everything can go into the refrigerator. It might seem counterintuitive, but it's true. The first step before you think about storing anything is selecting the freshest, best possible produce. And that means selecting leafy greens that aren't slimy or wilted. That means apples that don't have any mushy or brown spots, potatoes that are firm and not shriveled. A good rule of thumb for apples and root vegetables and potatoes and sweet potatoes is it should feel heavy for its size. All right, so potatoes and sweet potatoes, they like the same conditions: dark, cool, humid, which is why I keep mine in the wine fridge. But I'm not saying you gotta buy a wine fridge as a small root cellar at all. You have a cool basement. If you have like a cool closet, like somewhere off your kitchen or like anywhere. Sweet potatoes and potatoes love airflow. So like an open container, a basket, even a burlap sack, like an open weave burlap sack. I mean, if you happen to have one of those laying around, but you know, a bowl or a basket, anything, but they don't want the light, because the light will cause them to sprout, and it will cause potatoes specifically to produce a toxin, which makes them turn green and then eventually shrivel up. Don't refrigerate, because for potatoes, it makes their starches turn to sugar, which makes them turn brown, especially if you're frying them in oil. And sweet potatoes especially hate the cold of the refrigerator because it makes their center hard and fibrous and makes them take a lot longer to cook if the center like softens at all. So what about the other root vegetables? I'm talking carrot, parsnips, beets, turnips, radishes. These store best in like a crisper drawer with like high humidity. So let's say you buy beets or radishes or carrots or turnips with the greens still attached. And if those greens are still vibrant and fresh, you might want to save them and use them in like sautés or salads, but you can't store those greens attached to the root because they'll suck the water out of the roots. So what you do is you cut the greens off at the base, and you store the greens and the roots in separate zip top bags. Root vegetables will last up to 3 weeks, sometimes even more if you store them properly. All right, so cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, they're very easy to store. Cabbage, you can just store like a whole head naked, like in the crisper or on like the lower level where it can just like hang out by itself and it doesn't get like a lot of contact with like ethylene producing fruits. Cauliflower keeps great in that plastic little wrap that you buy it in. It's like perforated. It's like the perfect storage solution. Broccoli, I always put broccoli in a plastic produce bag or like a zip top bag because it will lose moisture and get floppy. You know what I'm talking about, those floppy broccoli stems. Don't worry about separating your onions and garlic. You can store them together. The key is onions do not like high humidity. They like a dry, cool place. They don't have to sit in the dark either. You can just put them in a bowl on your, breakfast table, your dining room table, even like a cool corner in your kitchen or a pantry if your pantry is climate controlled. The important thing with onions is that you don't refrigerate them. They don't like high humidity, and your refrigerator is a humid place. Winter squashes, which includes like butternut and kabocha and acorn, delicata, cheese pumpkins, like carnival pumpkins, there are so many winter squashes. Depending on the varietal squash, it should last about 3 to 6 months at room temperature. And if you have like a nice cool place to put it, it will keep on the longer end of that. As long as they're cool, you don't have to keep them in the dark, but just keep them away from bananas and other ethylene producing fruits. Keep them away from mangoes. You're good to go. When we say leafy greens, I'm sure that longevity and hardiness is not something that comes to mind. Esquirrel, tender kales, and like leafy chicories, really just like plunk them in a bag, plunk them in a zip top bag, unwashed. You don't want them wet. You don't want them dewy. Bought it from the store. If there's dirt on it, leave it there. Put it in a zip top bag, throw it in your fridge. Now, head lettuces, the same rule applies. Unwashed in a zip top bag. I don't care how many Nancy Meyers movies you've seen. Apples do not belong in a bowl on a marble countertop.
I haven't been acting crazy.
Apples belong in your refrigerator. Apples release a lot of ethylene gas, especially at warmer temperatures. The colder the apple is, the less gas it's going to release. So if you want to keep it crisp in your house, stick it in the fridge. I don't know about you, but a lot of the pears I find are not quite ripe. They're still like kind of rock hard. Let it ripen at room temperature. You can put them in a bowl. You can put them on the countertop. And then like once they ripen up a bit, I stick them in the refrigerator. And apples and pears should not hang out with other vegetables. Whatever ethylene gas they do emit in those cold temperatures does not affect berries. So sometimes in my apple and pear drawer, I also just throw a bunch of berries in there, like clamshells of berries as well, because I know that they're going to be fine hanging out all together. Another fruit that I am forced to buy unripe in Brooklyn, New York are mangoes. Same thing with pears. I let them ripen on the countertop, probably in my dining room if my kitchen is getting too hot. Once the flesh has like a bit of give, I put it in the refrigerator. Mangoes are also very sensitive to ethylene. Not only do they give off ethylene, they are sensitive to it. So keep them separate from apples and pears. Grapefruits, navel oranges, lemons, and limes all keep very well in the fridge. I keep enough citrus out on the counter that I think that I'll use within like a week or so. Anything beyond that goes in the fridge. Not all citrus fruit is ethylene sensitive, but just to keep things easy, I keep all citrus fruit away from apples and pears. This seems like a lot of information. It can seem intimidating, like all these different zones for, all your vegetables. But once you like put it into practice, it is something that will just become second nature. Trust me, I promise. Is that too much? Nancy Meyers movies? Yeah, you can look it up after. All right.